you ready?
Yeah.
Yes!
This is the Ross Kaminsky Show.
You're a great American.
Now, Ross Kaminsky.
Come on, man.
On Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
All right, good morning. I'm Ross. It's Tuesday. Thanks so much for starting your day with me. You know, just a quick thing. I saw this study yesterday that was just mentioned on that national news broadcast there about the study from, I think it was the University of Michigan, that claims that eating a hot dog takes 33 minutes off your life. And other similar kinds of things for other foods. It takes so many minutes off your life, or it adds minutes to your life. I would just like to state for the record, although I just found the study and I haven't read it yet. I'm going to go through and read this after the show later today. But I would just like to point out that this is impossible and this study is ridiculous. And the idea that eating a hot dog can take 33 minutes off your life. Look, if you're telling me that, eating cyanide will take some number of minutes off my life, all right, I'll go with that. Eating a hot dog, no.
Producer Shannon.
Yes.
But I think the study indicates that that's at the end of your life when things are already horrible. It's not like it takes a half hour out of a really great day on the beach.
Well, that is how it's being reported, though. Right, and I haven't it might say what you're saying it says. I haven't gotten to that part yet. But if you listen to that news report that just played a couple minutes ago here, they're certainly reporting it as, it shortens your life. Now, by definition, if you're shortening your life, you're shortening your life at the end. I mean, sort of. I guess one could posit that you're taking 33 minutes out of a nice day at the beach in the middle, but that doesn't make much sense, right? So by definition, I guess you'd be shorting it at the end. But I'm going to go read all of this, and I can tell you that it is just, it's ridiculous. I already know that without having to read it anymore, but I will read it more, and I'll come back to you tomorrow and try to help you figure out just what's wrong with it. But this is the kind of, quote unquote science that is just designed to nudge people. It is the stuff that I think makes people skeptical of, quote, the science, as Ben Shapiro termed it yesterday. The science, capital T, capital S. And I would note, by the way, and again, I haven't gone to look at all this, that the study apparently was funded by the National Dairy Council. So I don't know just what that means yet either. Did you want to say something else, Producer Shannon?
More importantly, today is National Waffle Day.
Oh.
Celebrate responsibly.
Yes, indeed. I wonder where waffles fall in on this worry-wart, nanny state, don't eat this or that because your life will be shorter nonsense. Oh, which reminds me, by the way, we're going to have lunch this Friday. You guys should come join me over at Steve's Snappin' Dogs. And if this study has scared you out of eating a hot dog, and it scared me into eating an extra one, I think. But if it scared you out of eating a hot dog, don't you worry, because Steve has burgers, and they've got the Beyond Burger for those who don't want to eat any meat at all. And anyway, we're going to meet at noon on Friday at Steve's Snappin' Dogs at 3525 East Colfax. And everybody who shows up to have lunch with me on Friday gets their lunch half off, thanks to Steve. And I should mention also, if you want to go try their food, he's made a very generous offer. If you show up at Steve's anytime between now and the end of September and order lunch, they'll get you a free drink, a soda or a lemonade or limeade or even a beer.
Producer Shannon.
If you want. But you got to tell them you heard about him from me. Yes, Producer Shannon, you're busy today.
If that story was actually true, that study, Joey Chestnut would have died 10 years ago.
Joey Chestnut would have died like a couple years before he was born, if this study was true. I'm like I said, I'm going to go through and suffer the brain damage of reading all this. So I'll figure it out, and we'll go through it together tomorrow. But I'm not.
You have to do it wearing your Abe Froman shirt.
Yes, I do. Oh, that's really funny. Oh my gosh! All right, we got a lot of stuff to do today. I don't take lots of time talking about nuts and bolts politics and political shenanigans, but I am going to mention one thing to you. You may recall several years ago, and I forget exactly what the bill was, I think it may have been a budget, that the House, many members of the House of Representatives did not want to be on the record supporting. They wanted to find a way to vote for it while dodging, good shot, Ross, while dodging, I just threw a straw wrapper into a trash can across the room and made it on the first shot. Not as good a shot as Shannon, who's very, very good at these things. But so you may recall some years ago that there was a little bit of a hubbub, and I think I was probably part of it on this show, talking about a tactic that the House of Representatives was engaging in called deeming, and I forget, it was something and deem a bill as passed. And the House leadership yesterday, the Democratic leadership, and Nancy, deem and pass is what it was called. And what it means is they pass something that they call a self-executing rule. Now, I think we should pass self-executing Taliban members. That would be much better, right? They just, they'd go get an American gun and there'd be something in the American gun that would cause them to be self-executing. And they could use that lovely new M16 to put a hole in the back of their own heads. But I digress. So let me go to Wikipedia. The self-executing rule, also known as deem and pass, is a procedural measure used by Congress to approve a legislative rule that contains such a provision. The House then deems a second piece of legislation as approved without requiring a separate vote as long as it is specified in the rule. That is, if the vote on the rule passes, then the second piece of legislation is passed as part of the rule vote. So this is a way for cowardly members of the House to try to vote on something that they know is unpopular and they don't actually want to be on record voting for it. This gives them cover to vote for it without actually having to say that they voted for it. They could say, the budget never came up for a vote and I never voted for the budget. When in fact what they did was they voted for a rule on the House floor that passed the budget without actually voting on the budget. And it is a really scummy way to pass legislation and no way to run a business, no way to run a government. It's really pretty nuts. And this is what Nancy Pelosi tried to do yesterday. So here's the thing. We've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to make sure you're all up to speed. So Nancy Pelosi knows that if the bipartisan infrastructure bill that already passed the Senate comes up for a bill in the House, not only will it pass, but it will also reduce the incentive for moderate Democrats to vote for the Democrats' ginormous, approximately $5 trillion. They call it $3.5 trillion because they're lying about how it'll actually work. This $5 trillion massive expansion of the welfare state, which is really what that second bill is. It is not infrastructure. They call it, human infrastructure and yada, yada, yada. It's just a giant expansion of the welfare state. Pelosi knows that her majority in the House is so slim that there's a good chance she could maybe not get that $5 trillion thing passed. I guarantee you, not a single Republican will vote for it. So if she lost just 4 Democrats, I think that's the number right now between resignations and people going to work for the Biden administration and all that. I think if she lost 4, then whatever it is that she's trying to pass won't pass, assuming there's no Republican votes for it. So what Pelosi tried to do yesterday, there are now, I think, 10 moderate Democrats on record saying, and they even wrote an op-ed to this effect, saying, let's take the win on infrastructure, on the true infrastructure bill, which, by the way, I do not support. All right, it's a lot better than the $5 trillion thing, It's still a massive waste of money. It's still $1 trillion plus during a time when we already have a $4 trillion budget deficit. So I'm against it, but it's not as bad as the Democrats' enormous thing. So yesterday, Pelosi tried to use this deem and pass measure to get enough House moderates to go along with passing the self-executing rule that would deem the Senate budget as passed, even though it hasn't even passed the Senate yet and isn't even fully written yet. By the way, it is a Senate budget resolution that was essentially written by Bernie Sanders. What is it about President Joe Biden that is so happy? The guy who theoretically ran as a moderate. We know he's not, but theoretically he ran as a moderate. He handed over the budget writing to Bernie Sanders, the loony old socialist who is chairman of the Senate Budget Committee now. It's nuts. So Pelosi tried to go down this road yesterday and tried to use this deem and pass tactic to give moderates in the House who are opposing this $5 trillion bill cover, but they didn't bite. They didn't go along with it. Look, never count Pelosi out. She's as clever as she is evil, and she's been doing this a long time. But the headline at CNBC, House delays vote to advance Biden's economic agenda as centrist Democrats derail Pelosi's plans. The chamber will reconvene Tuesday as lawmakers try to strike a deal to move forward with the measures. I would also note that the only moderate Democrat with spine right now in the U.S. Senate is Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. And I have to say, when she was running against, who was her Republican opponent at the time? I think it was Martha McSally. Martha McSally was an incumbent senator, but had gotten the job, if I remember correctly, originally by being appointed by the governor because the previous senator left or died or something. I don't remember the details. But Martha McSally had a great resume and was a terrible politician, right? She was a female fighter pilot, I believe, and lieutenant colonel or something like that in the Air Force. Again, I'm a little fuzzy on all the exact details, but I know them well enough. This is kind of the stuff that you need to know. And she was a Republican, but she was a bad candidate. And when Kyrsten Sinema was running against her, Kyrsten Sinema had been pretty far left, not the farthest left, not AOC, but a lot farther left than I was comfortable with in the House of Representatives when she was there. And so when she ran for the Senate, I supported Martha McSally, even though I recognized that Martha McSally was, just very, very disappointing for a former member of the military. Just turned into the usual kind of squishy, meaningless Republican that we've all become so tired of. So I gotta give a big shout out to Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat, for being on the record repeatedly and again yesterday saying she will not support a bill that spends anything close to $3.5 trillion. And remember, it's not really $3.5 trillion. It's more like $5 trillion. They get to $3.5 trillion by claiming that a bunch of the new government spending programs will just stop after several years, when we all know that politicians, including usually Republicans, will go along with extending government spending programs once they're in place because American voters get addicted to the free money and they want more of it. And so usually spending programs don't end. But Kyrsten Sinema is the brakes on this thing. And I think that's just an absolutely wonderful thing. All right, let me start on another story, and I'm not sure whether I'll get to all of it right now, but I'll at least get to some. So hold on, I need to get my login going here to this website. Okay, so there's a piece over at the Washington Post that was published yesterday, and it's entitled "Corporate America's $50 Billion Promise." Do you recall I think we talked about it a little bit, sort of during the George Floyd protests, that a bunch of corporations intending to demonstrate their wokeness to the world announced in the aggregate $50 billion with a B, quoting from the Washington Post, as a force for societal change and to fight racism and injustice. $50 billion. Apple and AbbVie, Facebook and Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble and other top corporations made broad claims about what they would do. Now, you will recall at the time that I said this is mostly nonsense. It's mostly virtue signaling. You know, if these companies really want to spend their money and shareholders are okay with it, because they're actually spending shareholders' money, right? So they're actually spending money that could otherwise be returned to the company's owners, namely your retirement account, as dividends or as an increased stock price. So if they're willing to make your retirement account worth less, so you have less money in retirement, so they can either preen and demonstrate their social justice and woke bona fides, or maybe they really care about making a difference, or maybe they believe, and there would probably be some truth to this part, that if societally something could be done to help people break out of a cycle of poverty, that then they could become better. Better is a tricky word. They could become more productive in the economic sphere in society, and everybody could be better off. Their quality of life would be better off if they were formerly poor or they grew up poor, but now they're not. They would become more consumers, and corporations that sell stuff would be better off. They would generate more income tax and sales tax and property tax, and those governments that collect all those things would be better off. So I get all that. But these companies didn't really talk about it that way. And what the Washington Post is reporting, they say more than 90% of the roughly $50 billion that these companies claimed they were going to, well, I don't know exactly what they claimed they were going to do with it, disperse or something to address racial inequality. More than 90% of it is allocated as loans or investments that they could stand to profit from, more than half in the form of mortgages. And two banks, JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America, accounted for nearly all of those commitments. Meanwhile, $4.2 billion, only about 9% of the total pledged, is in the form of outright grants. And of that, just a tiny fraction, about 71 million, went to organizations focused specifically on criminal justice reform, yada, yada, yada. And you know what? I think I should talk about this some more in the next segment, but let me just say that my reaction to this story, which I imagine that the liberals at the Washington Post are publishing as a form of critique of the banks and other companies that pledged money to help with social justice or whatever. My reaction is good. Good. I don't want this stuff to be in the form of outright grants, because outright grants almost never, ever work.
KHOW Denver, 630 KHOW, an iHeart radio station. Available everywhere on our free iHeart radio app. #1 for music, radio, and podcasts.